centered. So, what is today's episode? Keeping it too long from you. Today's episode is one that sits very deep within my soul. Um, for many years, I have been concerned about roles, gender roles. And it's not a topic that is new to us within this world. Yeah? Because every day we navigate the deep and treacherous waters that is masculinity and femininity. However, it is designed and however it presents itself to us in our daily lives. But I want to take this topic beyond that which is ordinary. I want to take this topic into a little bit of a provocative area, provoke thought, and provoke some amount of questions, concerns, and to raise the bar a little higher. So for me today, I wanted to dive into the change in energy when one of the gender pivots and assumes the role, function, responsibility of the other gender. And how is this treated within the context of a relationship? Does it fuel the relationship or does it frustrate the relationship? You know? How do we combat it? Does it require conversation? Does it require therapy? Does it require separation? All of these things I will explore. And if I'm not able to explore it here, certainly there is always the comment section for you to, give your feedback and to offer your own input and your own 2 cents as the case may be. So I've made some notes, and it is very important that I stick with my notes simply because I am no expert in this area, but I have some knowledge, some working knowledge of what I want to talk about. And until I get the experts in, I will always refer to the notes that I gather in my research, just to ensure that I'm speaking to you with some amount of competence, right? Albeit I'm no psychologist by the stretch. So when we talk about energy, we're talking about a charge. And in most instances, for those of us who are aware of what it means in its very basic, rudimentary way, it speaks to either an electrical charge or a charge from some other power source. And that is what an energy is. Now, for human beings, intrinsically, we get that charge from our society. What society tells us that we need to be and who we need to be. It's often through our socialization, and we get that energy or that charge. Now, in many of our lives, we've heard people speak about, oh, you're too masculine, to all my ladies. And to all my gents, you will hear some person say, you're too pink, or that pink fits you. The energy imbalance is what I'm about to talk about, the polarity in masculinity and femininity. What creates that balance, if at all one needs to be created, to ensure that there is synergy in relationships and people assume the right and correct roles that society places on them. So when you have instances where people says, what happened to your energy? Why is there a shift of energy? Why would somebody who is typically a very masculine person, masculine man, let me make that very clear, suddenly goes into his femininity and start to act and behave in ways that are quite uncharacteristic of the male species, and vice versa? Because of course we do have those ladies who they walk around everyday life and people will say to them, you carry too much masculine energy, you're too independent, you're too bold, you're too aggressive, you're too much. Yeah, and these are some of the words that I've heard of even myself, and this is why this topic resonates so personal with me. And I wanted to debunk and demystify a lot of the things that surround gender specific identification, and how as a society we can move beyond it to realize that there's no such thing, and if there is such a thing, yeah, how do we embrace and navigate it so that it doesn't become problematic in our personal, professional, or any other type of relationship or situationship that we may get ourselves in. So, of course, I wanted to start with what are gender specific rules, what are gender specific traits or characteristics, and I made a couple just quick, you know, descriptors of what these may be, or what these may be often understood by the general public. Now, we want to focus on what it is that it means to go beyond these ordinary descriptors. And that is what this particular episode is about, and more so this channel, what it is about. It is about taking you beyond those things that are considered to be the norm, allowing you to have a different, wider perspective. So let us look at what are some of the descriptors that I have heard. And again, it is my desire to always educate and inform, but I will always do so from my own personal experiences, and hope from my experiences something resonates with one of one of you here all. And I did. Somebody gave me a beautiful name about what to call you. I know some people have besties and all of that. I'm gonna call you my extraordinaires, because that's what we want to do. We want to reach to that point where we are very extraordinary in what we do. So my extraordinaires, I have compiled, and I'm counting here, about 10 gender specific descriptors that are often associated with the masculine gender. And I'll start with the first, grounded. I've often hear that the male of the species needs to be grounded, have strong roots. We talk about strength, being strong. I've often heard colleagues said, boy, a man for strong, bold, aggressive, resolute, a stabilizer, dependable, an anchor. Somebody who is logical, dominant, and centered. Now, all of these things, when I hear them, when I repeat them to myself, they raise some concerns for me, because I started to believe them. I started to say to myself, okay, so maybe I am masculine, because all of these things resonate personally with me. I am grounded. I am dependable. I am centered. I do have logical thinking. I do have moments when I'm dominant. I'm extremely bold and strong. But what does that mean to the world out there when I am dressed in a 6-inch stiletto? I have on lipstick and makeup to the gods, and I have on a pencil skirt. What does that mean? How does that come across to you when you see this image of divine femininity, but yet still what comes out, the output, is something that we can only associate with masculinity? Where is the dichotomy? How do we resolve that dilemma? Today, I intend to give you a snapshot into what I believe is some form of resolution. But before I jump into the resolution itself, I want to also give you some descriptors that I have come across within my space, and again within my own experience, as to what persons have used to describe the female gender. And again, I'll refer to my notes here. Nurturing, graceful, compassionate, sensitive, emotional, soft, tender, expressive. Now I stopped there because I wanted to create an equal balance about some of the things that I have often heard women be described as, or often heard what we should be described as. But what happens in our spaces and in the places that we go when our man turns up sensitive or emotional or soft, tender, expressive? What happens to that man then? How is he looked at? How do we interpret his behavior? Right? And these are some of the inconsistencies that I want us to process throughout this conversation. Because at the end of the day, what is clear, what is absolutely clear, is that there has been an evolution taking place where gender role is concerned. And there is no debate, there is no questions about it. It is a clear and present, I'm going to say danger because of my own perspective. I do believe this is a dangerous and treacherous water when we are not able to be who we are at our absolute core without being assigned specifics, right? So the 21st century has clearly seen this evolutionary step where masculinity and femininity, it's slowly merging to the point where we are seeing a reversal taking place. And it allows us to now engage into the conversation as to what happens when we have a complete reversal, a complete role reversal. And I'm going to take it from the simplicity of just everyday life before we go into what happens in the workplace, what happens in the relationships that we form. So let us look at first and foremost what happens in our day-to-day experience. So you go somewhere and simple, the supermarket. Everybody goes to the supermarket. And when you see a man taking up a bottle of bleach or taking up a particular salad dressing, and he's there going through the labels with his fine tooth comb, yeah, looking at calories, looking at what it means to have this thing in your body, and somebody passes and says he must be that. And for the right thinking minded person, you think to yourself, is this a behavior of a male, or this is a response that is expected from a female? In other words, should females be the only ones who will be so diligent and exercise that due level of consciousness when it comes to something as simple as buying food? Is that a role that we ascribe to that gender and that gender only? And if somebody steps out of pocket and decides, okay, I want to do this, that we're going to now say, label this individual or label this person as this, or label that person as that. Let us take it a little bit further. Let us look in the workplace, 9 to 5 workplace. A lot of us are part of that sphere, and a lot of us come across different scenarios and different instances where we see that role reversal taking place actively in front of our eyes. Some of us remain a little bit quaint about it. We're not very loud, and we're not very outspoken about what is taking place, but in our little four corners of our offices, of our own homes, we will talk more actively about it. Now, I don't believe in that. I believe in coming to a space where something is ventilated respectfully. And for me, in a workplace, you'll come across a female who cuts her hair off. She wears pants, masculine looking clothes. She's not very demure. She doesn't wear makeup, she doesn't wear lipstick, she doesn't do the fancifuls and all of that. She displays character traits that are strong, bold, aggressive, dominant, logical. And immediately, where do our minds go? She have to be that. Now, I have evaluated my own self. And at one point in time, I made record of it and I made an observation. I said, I must be an anomaly because somewhere the Venn diagram crosses for me. I don't necessarily go around in bare face or baggy clothes or flat shoes or any of the other things associated with the male of the species. But when I step out into the world as graceful and as feminine as I want to be or as I can be, my energy, which is what I spoke about at the beginning of the vlog, my energy is one that somebody will come to me and say, I can't deal with you, you're too independent. I can't deal with you, you're too strong. I can't deal with you, you're too aggressive. I can't deal with you, you're too dominant. I can't deal. And then I get relegated into a box of a man that man. She a man. And I stop to think to myself, is there ever a point in our lives, in our engagement, in our interaction, where somebody can cross both spheres with such success that it becomes a non-issue? And by non-issue, I don't mean we don't see it, but it doesn't become a conversation. It doesn't become something that we sit at the cooler and discuss. And for me, it has been something that I wanted to change. I want for us to realize that you can have a strong, dominant, tender woman. And vice versa, you can also have a very sensitive, soft-spoken, logical man. But how does that present itself is what we need to change. Because gone are the days, and my hope and desire is that we get to that place sooner rather than later. But certainly, gone are the days when we come pre-packaged as our foreparents, our grandmothers and our grandfathers, and even our mothers. Gone are the days when this is how it is and it can't be anything different. And if it is something different, it cannot be accepted. So, let us look at how this gender evolution looks outside of the 9 to 5 now. We're coming home now. How does it look in your home? And this is where the gravamen of the conversation becomes important. What happens when the man in our lives suddenly decide to become soft, suddenly decides to become tender, suddenly not turning up and showing up as this strong, dependable, centered, dominant protector, provider, preserver? What happens then? Do we as women suddenly trot back into the traditional understandings while we want to remain that people or persons who wanted to work for us, having that dichotomy when it suits? Or are we the type of people that when it shows up into our own relationships, we are okay with it and we can say, okay, it's all right, he don't have to be strong, he don't have to be a provider, he doesn't have to be a protector, he can live in him feminine, soft girly era? How will you treat that individual? Will there still be respect? Will there still be love? Will there still be admiration? Will there still be a need and desire for that individual? And that's some of the questions that I would love for us to answer. Now, personally, and I tell you, always will go back to personal for me because that's my experience. For me, it is very black and white. Sadly enough, it's very black and white for me. And while I understand that there are instances where people can navigate both of these roles seamlessly, I do believe that the role and gender that you are must be one that assigns directly with your biological sex. And that should be the dominant one that comes out at any given point in time. So for me, the dominant trait is what is linked to your biological sex. That is what should show up and show out in every of these instances. Everyday life, 9 to 5, home. But it doesn't mean that there isn't a subservient part that can come out, right? But I tell you, for me, the dominant has to be the one that is tied to biology. So in relationships, a man cannot turn up, and I'm going to say this again, a man cannot turn up dominantly too feminine. It's a no-no for me. And a woman, vice versa, cannot turn up too masculine either. So you have to understand that in every aspect of what it is that you are doing, your dominant feature tied to your biology must be that which is prominently displayed in different arenas, different spaces, different places. And if instances and circumstances and moments arise that you have to pull down on some subservient gender specific descriptors, then by all means, go ahead. Go right ahead. So for me, that is the conversation, that is the provocative thought, that is us moving beyond what is the norm of thinking that we should either be one thing or the other. In summary, for me, it is understanding ultimately what and where and why. So, extraordinaires, if you found this conversation and this episode to have been helpful, I always say do the right thing. Like, share, subscribe, and of course comment. I like to hear the comments. The comments help to guide the topics and the episodes to come. And as always, I leave you with one and one thought only. Always yearn to go beyond the ordinary. See you in our next episode. Another interesting topic we'll talk about. But until then, take care, my friends. Bye-bye.